The coronavirus pandemic is beginning to reshape almost every aspect of our world, and that includes education. With schools closed for the foreseeable future, hundreds of millions of Chinese students stuck at home have been turning to online education. And recently, Chinese Ministry of Education announced that the National College Entrance Examination, the Gaokao, will be postponed by a month and would take place in July rather than June. So what might these changes mean for high school graduates? What effect could online classes have on the educational system as a whole? And what are the concerns arise from the above to learn online? Finally, beyond the pandemic, can e-education ever be as effective as the classroom? And is studying online now here to stay? To discuss these and other issues, I'm pleased to be joined by Professor Wang Xin, Executive Deputy Dean of the School of English Studies at Shanghai International Studies University, Zhou Yueqi, postgraduate student at Business School at the National University of Singapore, and Professor Xue Lan, Dean of the Schwarzman College at Tsinghua University. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. So let me start with you, Professor Wang. The decision to postpone the National College Entrance Examination, the Gaokao, probably one of the most important tests on paper by a Chinese student. Do you think what effect it will have on the student's performance?
Okay. So the COVID-19, this epidemic, has exerted very negative effects. And as we know that such effect cannot escape our notice. And as to the students who are going to take the college entrance examination, they are really under great pressure. But I think that what they worry most, or what they are concerned most, is that the date cannot be settled. But once there is news, they would feel much relieved for the part of not only the students, but also the teachers as well as the parents. So no news is bad news. Once the date is set, now they could feel relieved, and what they need to do is to make some adjustment, to reschedule their plans so that they can better prepare for the final examination, for the college entrance examination. But as to the postponement, I think the postponement really entail certain kind of more time, more efforts, that's for sure. But I think this is also a very good opportunity for the students to test their stamina, their perseverance. Because as we know, education is not only concerned about the accumulation of knowledge, the improvement of the capability, but also the fostering, the development of the virtue. So this is also the opportunity for the students to face up to the challenge, the problems, to have the fortitude as the virtue.
But do you think the postponement itself makes sense? And what do you make of the length of the time, 1 month? Because some argue, well, these students don't have enough time to prepare. Others say it wouldn't make much difference as all of them are facing the same deadline pressure.
I think in terms of the examination, what matters most is the fairness and equity. As long as all the students are faced with the same condition, under the same pressure, I think this is all right. Okay? And as to the postponement of 1 month, it would be no problem. I still remember that when we took the college entrance examination decades ago, we just took in July, not in June.
And also, Yueqi, what is your take? I presume you also took entrance examination, Yueqi, in Singapore. Do you think 1 month of more preparation would make you better prepared?
Actually, I feel that it makes no difference because it would just add on the students' stress and the suffering time that they would take on the exam. So
they would rather wrap it up as soon as possible, you're saying.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Why is that? Because it seems the issue is that a lot of the students couldn't go to schools, couldn't go to classrooms, they need more time to prepare the most important examination in their life. You don't agree?
Yeah. So I think it is due to the current situation that they have to postpone. So it's quite understandable, and I feel that the student might also feel better if they are to have 1 month more time to prepare for the exam. Yeah.
And what about the situation in Singapore? It seems that Singapore hasn't closed all the schools, but rather practice very strict monitoring of the students' health condition. Is that the case?
Yes. So what Singapore do is very different from other countries. So what our school do is try its best to minimize the impact of the COVID-19 and to maintain the daily function and our basic function of the school. So basically our study does not affect it that much. But due to the class size restriction, most of our courses have already moved to online teaching. Yeah.
And how would you compare the two different formats, online education and go to classroom, have a real schooling education?
Well, I would say based on the review of most of our schoolmates, we do love the in-class teaching more, because those online teaching just do not give us a sense of engagement, and it's very easy to get absent-minded. And it's also, the e-learning also deprives us of the campus life experience. And also, we feel like the mainstream does not have that recognition on the education quality if it turns to online teaching. So our students are kind of worried that maybe this online teaching experience might weaken our competitiveness and our recognition in the job market.
We have Professor Xue Lan on the line. Professor Xue, about the opening of the universities, some areas have been affected by the outbreak, but some others who are less affected, like Qinghai, Shanxi, and Jiangsu, and in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, they have already started their schools and universities. When do you expect classes to resume in all over China, especially in Beijing and Shanghai?
Well, I think as people know that we have, in China, have a lot of universities, a lot of university students, probably somewhere, I think, close to 40 million students. So I think that, if all of the students, universities are opening at the same time, I think that would probably create a lot of, traveling around the country. So I think that, the sort of strategy to minimize the potential risks to students who might need to travel to their universities, I think that my sense is that probably, I think it's a good idea for different provinces and for universities in the same cities try to not to open at the same time, so to avoid sort of like a generate peak time. So I think that's probably the overall. I think the way. Of course, I think for different provinces, specifically at what time is good to open. I think that really have to be, it's a decision to be made by the local government to, based on their situation, particularly on the how they feel comfortable about the way they have already controlled the situation, the virus spread.
And Professor Wang, what about the schools in universities in Shanghai? How has COVID-19 affected your classes, your school year, and also the university operation?
Okay, speaking of the negative effect of COVID-19, I think all the colleges and universities are in the same boat. So we really experienced the very effective and positive preparations just 2 weeks prior to the beginning of the new semester. Now, to be honest, at the very beginning, some teachers were not that willing to conduct teaching online. They refused to learn something because they know they would have to spend more time, more energy on the learning of the new technology. So this is really challenging for most of the teachers, particularly for those professors. But gradually, after we called on them to actively participate in this kind of teaching online, so more and more teachers are ready to teach online. And even some of the teachers expressed that kind of willingness to continue this kind of teaching online even after the epidemic came to an end, because they also can benefit in one way or another from the efficiency of this kind of teaching online.
Can you please
and
weigh in on the pros and cons of online teaching from a perspective of a professor? Why a professor likes teaching online and why doesn't he or she doesn't like teaching online?
You mean that at the very beginning?
No, now,
at
after they have been doing this for quite some time. What is the pro and cons?
Because they, you know, pro and cons. Okay, first of all, in the online classroom, they feel that they feel closer to the students. And some students in their real classroom, maybe some students would be shy and not courageous enough to speak out their mind, to express their ideas in class. But since they are seated at home, feel a little bit easy, feel at home, and then they may have more courage to speak, right? And they would be more active. So this is really encouraging for the professors. And they also feel this is an interesting experience for them. And besides, what is important is that we are supported, we are backed up by very effective and efficient technical support from the School of Education, from our university, and from the Information Technology Center, and from the Office of Academic Affairs. So this requires a kind of concerted efforts. And what is needed is a kind of cooperation and coordination. So with this kind of concerted efforts, those teachers gradually come to realize that this could work. So they come to enjoy this kind of teaching online. And besides, both the teachers and the students can enjoy the large amount of resources, a large quantity of resources online. And this can improve the efficiency of teaching.
Professor
so this can partly explain this kind of change of their attitudes.
And Professor Xue, do teachers and professors in Tsinghua University also embrace online teaching? Do they also run into problems?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that Tsinghua University started the spring semester on time online. I think over 4,000 courses were basically, started, online, I think, in February, according to the schedule. Of course, as my colleagues in Shanghai have already said, that actually it took a lot of efforts in preparation, and particularly getting faculty members to get used to the, to teaching online. So I think initially, it took some time for people to get used to it. I think now, all over 4,000 courses are actually going on quite smoothly, and so I think that. Indeed, I think that now people are getting used to the sort of the new normal.
You are saying this is going to be new normal. Are you suggesting that probably the pandemic will change how we are taught, educated forever?
Well, I think that actually it offers some new opportunities that we could have never imagined that actually online teaching could be as easy as what we are now, getting used to. And so certainly this opens up some really new opportunities. For example, at Schwarzman College, that we used to have, faculty members traveling all over, from overseas to China, just to give 1 or 2 lectures. So we have to be quite careful of inviting only a limited number of people. But now I think, given that actually now we can have all this kind of new platforms, it's quite possible that we could have leading scholars from, from Africa, from, from U.S. and from Europe to, to engage with our students. So that indeed actually is offering new opportunities that we have not had the opportunity to think about before.
But what about the argument that screen cannot actually replace classroom? It's not just cognitive skills. You need emotive skills, communicative skills, psychological counseling. You need a nod, a smile, a pat on the back, a lot of a face time.
Yeah. I think that indeed, I think, again, I'm not a educational specialist, but my own thinking is that for undergraduate education, I think where there's a lot of actual need for, in a way, to cultivate people, I think that to really to get people to, I think to an environment actually where people interact with each other and so on. I think that kind of education, I would say that on-site, interactions are critically important. At the same time that, for graduate education, where I think there's, I think a much more sort of in-depth thinking and, I think discussion, interactions, I think, needed. I think that it's more of an intellectual exchange, where I think online is less, less of a problem. I think compared to undergraduate education. So I think that that's my personal view. That the two are different.
Yueqi, you have been pursuing undergraduate and postgraduate education. So do you agree with Professor Xue that there are some differences at different levels of your learning? And what do you miss the most about classroom?
I partly agree with Professor Xue because, yes, the undergraduate study does require more guidance from the professor other than from the academic side, but also like from the life guidance or something. But judged from the differences between the graduate and the undergraduate experience, I would say the difference is the graduate study is more depends on the student themselves. So that might be a more likely scenario to turn to the e-learning. But there is something that we miss is those campus culture, those campus activities, and those interaction with our friends. I think this is irreplaceable because of the e-learning, yes.
And there is another issue that is the equity of education resources. So Professor Wang, the issue that affecting online education is access. Not all people, not all students, especially those living in poor and remote rural areas, can have access to fast-speed internet. That means they cannot have the same education as those peers living in big cities. How can we address this issue if this pandemic has aggravated this problem?
Okay, yes. Actually, this problem has been taken into consideration, well taken into consideration. Just prior to the beginning of this new semester, now the leadership of our university, CSU, and they just proposed that kind of subsidy that could be offered to all the students who have problem having access to the online teaching or online learning. Now, just at the level of our school, we also did a very, very detailed survey of every student at different levels, both undergraduate students and graduate students. And we have more than 1,000 students in our school. And after the survey, there were about 8 students who had a problem with having access to the teaching or learning online. And also we subsidized those students, and also besides we offered some other means, like we take advantage of some other means like WeChat or email or QQ and some other channels, so that they could be of some assistance to better guarantee that every student shall not be left behind in the process of learning online.
But Professor Xue, the elite schools like Tsinghua University or Shanghai Foreign Studies University probably can afford to subsidize their students, but what about those living in mountainous areas, in far-fetched places, who don't have access to internet or computer at all?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what the issue you raised, I think is really an important one. I think that's sort of the, I think what people are talking about, so-called the new infrastructure. I think actually, so I think in the short term, I think a lot of the, the innovative ways that my colleagues have mentioned, I think that's, can provide some short-term solutions. But I think in the long run, I think we really need to have a new generation of infrastructure. It's just like electricity, so I think, right? I mean, in the 1950s and so on, we have villages that did not have the electricity. Then the country tried every effort to make the connection. I think now, that for the so-called the new infrastructure development, I think we need to invest, in those new, infrastructure such as 5G and so on, to make sure that indeed those mountainous areas will be connected. I think actually we saw some. We saw some news was saying that as during the last few months, and there were some local efforts trying to make the connections and to build up some short-term solutions for those remote rural areas.
But you don't believe that with the technology and advent of computers, internet, it might widen the gap between those haves and have-nots in terms of access to education opportunities?
Well, I think that's a public policy issue. I think that if you just entirely rely on the market, I think that indeed might widen the gap. However, I think that with proper public policy, I think you can build infrastructures that connect everybody onto the internet, and I think that will reduce the gap. I think we've already seen that through the online teaching and many other things, you have the capability to allow, say, for example, maybe a rural, say, university or rural high school, that they can have access to the best teaching in the country in a relatively low-cost way. So I think that here, as long as you have the proper policy to support this kind of initiatives, I think that indeed the gaps can be narrowed.
And another question, Professor Wang, I want your take on this. You said that a lot of professors in your school now enjoy teaching online. Do you think this pandemic probably will serve as a game changer for online education? That means a lot of courses will turn online and reduce the face time at classrooms in the future.
Okay. I think to some extent what you said is right. So before this academic, maybe some professors had never had this kind of idea of teaching online. So this is the challenge, but we'd like to take the challenge as another kind of opportunity. So in the process of trying, and they come to have some fancy for this kind of teaching aided or assisted by internet. We can never say actually technology will take the place of human beings, or the online teaching can really take the place of the real classroom teaching. The answer must be negative. But we should say that the good combination and integration of these two kinds of teaching can really, to some extent, improve the efficiency and the quality of teaching, both for the part of the students as well as for the part of teachers. I think we should see this kind of trend, and the technology should serve people, should serve the development or the efficiency of teaching. Okay, so in this aspect, I believe that we experience this kind of change of attitude, and we come to embrace the technology.
And Yueqi, what is your take? What is the ratio of online and offline education should be, or it depends on different age groups, different disciplines, and even different countries and cultures?
Yes, I think this depends because as for those high school education, middle school education, and undergrad education, it is very important for students to have those correct guidance from teachers in class because they're like less self-motivated than those graduate or adults. So they may need the teachers to supervise their study. That's why I think the e-learning might not suitable for those age group that is under, like, let's say, under 20 or something. But as for the undergrad or the adult education, the e-learning is a quite plausible way, yes.
And this has actually become a global phenomenon. A lot of countries, including the United Kingdom and the US, also pushing back their days for entrance examinations and also enrollment of new students. So yes, you have been studying in Singapore. What do you think this might have on international students' enrollment and the school operation down the road?
Well, actually, I think those huge trends might have an quite negative effects on those international students because one thing is that they are faced with those delay or the deadlines that they might not able to meet, and the other point is that this coronavirus issues might lead to their incapability of catching up with the school. But a silver lining is that if the U.S. or other school we're willing to continue the e-learning, let's say equally conduct the e-learning for all the global students, that I feel like the Chinese student might not be that much in a negative position.
And Professor Xue, this may have long-term effects and short-term effects on students' choices because the postponement of Cao. How will, with schools closed, how can parents, teachers, and also those caregivers help those students who have to make different choices facing a different time now?
Indeed, I think that's a huge challenge for many, the schools and the parents and so on. At the same time that I also see various kind of innovations and people find new ways of trying to do that. So I think that probably needs a whole society's collective effort. For example, I think that maybe that the employers will also have to be prepared to to allow the employees to say to take turns, for example, to care for their kids, and maybe the employees themselves can work together. Say, okay, we are now getting the kids into one group, and so we have one teacher for a day, and so we take turns. So I think there are many short-term solutions that actually people can work together, and that need I think the critical thing is that we need a collective effort.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Xue and Professor Wang, and also thank you for your participation, Yueqi. And we wish all the students taking the national entrance examination a good luck down the road. That's Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Joe in Beijing. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.